Adam Soos here for Rebel News. I am very happy to be joined by the Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs. You know, people often think about in terms of provinces that are advancing conservative ideals. Alberta, Saskatchewan, those places come to mind. But I think they're doing themselves and New Brunswick a disservice when they don't include New Brunswick in that list. And that's in large part thanks to a lot of the work that you've been doing. I suppose my first question for you, under your leadership, New Brunswick became sort of one of the provinces taking the lead on advocating for parental rights and ensuring in particular that students, particularly students under 16, aren't being acknowledged by sort of pronouns that they've selected without their parents being informed. How important was that?
Very important, Adam. Shockingly so, in the sense that it was a surprise and became something that kind of went nationwide. I think parents, of school-age children were surprised too that was the situation at their school. So when it came to light that, what do you mean, we're hiding information from parents, and we're putting teachers in a very difficult position when parents would come into a parent-teacher night. Right. So it's time to just discuss some of the basics, fundamentals, and our society was built on strong families and parents, really be engaged in their child's as they grow up, and certainly under 16, we have a lot of different decisions we made when we were younger than that, and if a lot of those would come to fruition, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
Right. So I suppose with this being an election year coming up now, certainly members of the media might vilify any opposition to any one of these sorts of agendas, but do you think that this is a winning issue, maybe not among media, but among voters in New Brunswick?
Well, certainly the response that I've had from parents, and on the street, wherever you go, stand up for parents, but find a way to balance it so that yes, we want to protect all children going to school. There's no question about that. And in today's society, parents come in many diverse kind of situations, but they all care about the kids that they're raising. So I think it's a pretty fundamental issue right across the province, and it needs to stay focused on what it is, what it's for, and it's for having parents being parents and being engaged with the raising of their kids and ensuring that they don't lose that. Parents are the continuity that children have through their life. I mean, they have one teacher after another and they have one mentor after another in society, but parents are the constant. So we need to ensure that they're not, or they're treated as such, and it's not a kind of a separate.
I believe the Fraser Institute called you the most fiscally conservative premier in the country. You also talk about advocating for common sense policies. Looking at the last couple of years, there has been a marked increase of jobs in your province. Why do you think that is, and do you expect that to continue?
Well, it has been a big increase, a big influx of new residents. We're at up about by 70,000 people in the last 2.5-3 years. Population growth of just around 10%. Employment is up. We've had about 30,000 new jobs. So I'm talking on a population we started at about 750, 760, and now we're at 850. So there's been an interest in the province. I think following COVID, there was a lot of people thinking, well, maybe we'd look elsewhere. And when they've stopped and looked, we found that, wow, we do have a nice province to live and work in and grow family. And that, of course, adds to the whole situation of what we're talking about with parents. But in all of this, it creates a lot of challenges. I mean, we've had housing increases in costs. We've had certainly apartments now. We're building 5,000-6,000 new units. We've had a building explosion, just of trying to meet the demands. Right. So that has its own challenges with people that live there all their lives saying, wow, things are more expensive. Everywhere I go, groceries are more expensive. But I thank the federal government for a lot of that. Yeah.
Well, on that front, the taxes in New Brunswick are nowhere near what people are paying in Quebec. But compared to Alberta, they're quite high. Is that poised to change, or is that part of life in Atlantic Canada?
Well, it was coming down. We actually have dropped the tax in all brackets. We've reduced the double tax, it was called, on non-owner occupied. We've slowed the assessment process down, so we have a cap on assessment so you don't get hit all at once. And we've asked municipalities to reduce their tax rate when the assessments go up. Great. And we've looked at the same thing. If we're seeing a growth and we can mitigate that and we're getting more revenue because of it, can we actually reduce it to the consumer? And that's the goal throughout this. Yeah. And trying to manage expenses and the budget. And we've been successful so far, but affordability is a major challenge in the province.
Now, the carbon tax carve-out sort of divided the country in many ways. You saw Atlantic Canada getting special treatment. Do you think, sort of two-part question, do you think that was Trudeau trying to sort of garner votes from people he thought he might win over? And on the other hand, do you think it completely undermined the argument that the carbon tax doesn't harm people?
I think that it undermined it. It showed the real Trudeau, actually. And while I appreciated there certainly was, we are in oil and electrical heat, we're certainly probably the highest per capita in that regard. So it was necessary to help families. But what it said is that the whole carbon climate change agenda wasn't quite as high on the radar as popularity in the polls.
Wonderful. I suppose my next question for you, Alberta encounters a lot of hostility anytime we try to develop our natural resources, advance, get pipelines built. Is New Brunswick experiencing the same thing with this federal government?
Well, I was a big advocate for Bill C-69. I mean, I did come from an industry, an oil and gas industry, but it's not so much because of that, but the knowledge of the industry, in the sense that I supported the gas development particularly. I supported crude supply from Canada because it comes to one of the largest refineries in North America, and we could be supplying Europe right now. Yeah. So here we are, we give Ukraine money, which no one is arguing that, but we give $600 million over like 3 years. But then we don't supply a bit of energy to Europe to help offset Russian supply to them. And so we're funding the war in two sides. So I think the policies that have been put in place are erroneous. I think the fact that we could have a major impact on reducing emissions by sending natural gas, LNG, to shut down coal plants, reducing emission on each and every coal plant you shut down by 50%, could have a huge impact. But instead we focus on a bubble of 1.5% of world emissions in Canada, and we cause more affordability to everybody that lives here, when we could be a major game changer worldwide.
Do provinces really have the power with this federal government in place to sort of make enough changes, make enough legal challenges, as we've seen in Alberta, to sort of steer the ship back towards the right direction, or is a change of federal government needed?
Well, I mean, certainly I think change is needed in the federal scene, but it's we can put our own, oar in the water, and we have our meetings as premiers collected across the country. But it is a challenge because if you have federal policies that are governing the kind of the oversight of, I put a clean energy plan together, and we issued it 2 weeks ago, and it follows the roadmap because those are the rules of the land. Do I think it's practical? Do I think it's realistic? No. But it's what we have to do at this time, following the rules of the land. And I do believe we have to be cognizant of that. However, I've asked over and over again for kind of a scientific review of what's realistic, what's not realistic, because thinking we're going to have complete cars, electrical by 2035, not realistic. I mean, we can't get mines approved today, and all the mines required. It's just not realistic.
Well, we're just borrowing power from Saskatchewan, facing the threat of blackouts with on the cusp. 2 more questions for you. I know you've got a big crowd out there waiting to speak with you. How have relationships been, particularly between you and Premier Danielle Smith? And is there any talk of perhaps whether it be legal action or further cooperation to simply get pipelines from us to you and to get our oil, Alberta oil energy, Canadian energy out to international markets?
Well, we've had very good discussions with Premier Smith and in the meetings with our First Ministers. We agree on a lot of items, and certainly if we could use Alberta energy coming to the East Coast for the refinery there, but export beyond. I mean, I would have loved to seen Canada East, and I was out here promoting Canada East at the time, and really that got stalled, not because of the economics, because of the federal policies and in Quebec.
Final question for you. Is Trudeau serving as a unifying factor for this country, not through good decisions, good policy, but by playing a sort of heel to the entirety of Canada?
No. It's not. He's not playing as unifying factor because Canada has been strong because of its diversity and the recognition of that diversity throughout the country, and that includes every province. But when you kind of have a federal rule that overrides all of that and basically said this is how it's going to be, and with policies, whether they be social, whether they be commercial, whether they be economic, it's there's a balance here, and many governments have found that balance. But boy, we're out of balance right now.
Do you feel, though, that because he's so out of touch, you have provinces working together, Canadians standing united against him?
Well, I think we're seeing the need for a change in Canada because we need it. We're seeing in every sector, we're seeing how the country economically is becoming very much at risk. And people maybe don't think that's going to happen. Well, what has kept our country strong for the years has been our natural resources. Right. And when you start pushing those to the back burner, so there's a transition. No one's denying climate change. No one's saying we can't do better and reduce emissions. We're all in that same camp. The process of doing it so people don't shut the lights out, so they can continue to afford to live and work in their country. There's the balance. And we've just kind of missed the balance, let alone to my point of having a major impact worldwide on like clean natural gas
Right.
that we have an abundance of. When I was in Europe a few years ago on a hydrogen conference, it was really quite amazing that they said we are shocked that we don't have any energy coming from Canada.
Shocking. Well, Premier Blaine Higgs, I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Alberta. And for everyone at home, I want to thank you all so much for tuning in. For Rebel News, I'm Adam Soos. If you want to learn more about the efforts to stop radicalization and LGBTQ indoctrination within schools right across this country, go to stopclassroomgrooming.com.